Hello, everyone. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E-Soup, and today we're continuing Ballad of Sword and Wine, Volume 6. We are at the halfway point, which is always super exciting. I can't believe we're already here. A lot happened last time. It was perhaps a little traumatizing for some of us after we waited for, Yaoi When You for so long. And we got the Song Yu chapter, and it was a lot. It was maybe not what we were expecting. I guess we didn't consider the possibility of toxic yaoi, and then it happened. And I feel like a lot of other stuff happened last time as well, but it almost like got eclipsed by that in my brain because I'm trying to remember what some of it was, and I'm like, oh dear, what was going on? But oh, that's right. No, I'm sorry. We ended on a cliffhanger. How could I forget? I was thinking too much about the toxic yaoi, and I forgot that we ended on, something happened to Xiao Chie, and Shenza Chun is just finding out in a report, about that, and we don't know what happened. We don't know what situation he's in, and that's where we had to end on Wednesday and wait until today to find out more about. So yeah, that's the real traumatizing moment there. Good to see you, Psykeen, Vase, Henry. Yeah, no, Henry, I think it was kind of hot, scary but hot. It was did I take my hat off in mourning for Song Yu, or is it just a heat wave? Well, a little bit, a little bit of heat wave, a little bit of like, I actually shaved my head again recently. So like my hair was getting a little bit too long and just looked stupid. So I was wearing the hat, and then finally I shaved my head and I was like, I need to just do this more often. But, I'll just pretend that it's in mourning for Song Yu. Xiao Chia is so clever. Oh, okay. Uh-huh. So, whatever is going to happen, I presume. Well, you know what? I had no, doubt that Xiao Chia could get through a situation. He can get through a lot of situations. So whatever is happening to him, I know he's gonna be okay, but it's still scary. It's okay, Henry. You felt weird about saying, hey, you look balder than usual. Thank you. It's okay, you could say that. Oh, this is my... Wait, you can't see all of it, but this is my, Longshan shirt. And then it says love story, or love song, sorry, down there. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure the characters are for Wangxian, like their names together and the song and all that. Yeah, so Xiao Chia is in a situation, everybody's in a situation. I'm gonna get started and we're gonna find out what the heck is happening. We are on page 237 for chapter 206, which is called Frozen River. Yes, everything is fine. Everything is totally fine. Oh, I forgot to say what chapters we're reading. So we're reading chapters 206 to 210 today. Tan Hu's scouts in Duanzhou had lost communication with Xiao Chia completely 3 days ago. He and his vanguard squad had encountered the Scorpion Achi's men near the Chasha River and lost badly. After that, the vanguard had vanished in the snow. The scouts couldn't find any trace of them. They seemed to have disappeared into thin air. The Biansha horsemen had set up a perimeter on the west bank of the Chasha River, and he and his vanguard squad were besieged, hemmed in by Achi against the water. Tantai Hu had no way of searching the battlefields, and so all he could do, besides waiting anxiously, was send the brutal news to the Li Bei homeland in Suzhou. They couldn't afford to wait and hope. If Xiaoqie was trapped or injured, Wu Ziyu needed to immediately notify Guo Weili at 3rd Sand Camp, and Li Bei's forces would have to ride south at once to stop up the gaping hole in their defenses that was Mount Luo. If the Bian Sha troops broke through there, the consequences would be unimaginable. Shen Zichuan didn't bother with the carriage. He mounted Frostfall and set off at a gallop. Oh, I'm just thinking about their, like, complementary, like, matching horses. Oh, goodness. When he arrived at Mount Luo, it was the dead of night. Wu Ziyu hurried out to receive him and saw no expression on the prefectural governor's bloodless face. Your lordship. Not daring to engage in idle chatter, Wu Ziyu cut to the chase as he followed Chen Zichuan into the campground. The horsemen were on the southeast side of Duanzhou. We think they originally intended to stop Tantai Hu, who is still in the west, from proceeding eastward. Arya must still be in the southeast. Shen Zichuan stood at the entrance of the camp, his shoulders mantled in snow. Who were the attendant officers with him? Gujin, Yinchang, and He Rigu, Wu Ziyu answered. Tantai Hu is the only one Arya ordered to stay put. Master, Fei Sheng put in from behind him. Why not let the embroidered uniform guard race over to Tantai Hu's camp? We'll take some men and scout. By tomorrow night. But Chen Zichuan had already whirled around. He swung astride his horse once more and said to Wu Ziyu, Send a letter to Yu Xiaozai and Kong Ling. Tell them to seal off all the roads heading west out of Zhongbo, now. Direct any merchants traveling to the trade market to take a detour from Suzhou. Yan Heru, who had followed him, had only just stepped out of his carriage. His backside was still numb from the journey when he heard Shen Zichuan's words and staggered after the horse. He was eager to do business with Fanzhou and Dongzhou, especially now that both prefectures were suffering a shortage of grain and clothing. Your lordship, hey, let's talk about this. Can you at least allow grain from Huzhou and Fanzhou and Dongzhou? If so, maybe we... Sure. Shen Zichuan's gaze was icy. He bent and patted Yan Heru's cheek with the handle of his riding crop. Grain is fine. But if your little cohort of merchants dares smuggle a single extra trinket into the east of Zhongbo without my express approval, I'll hang your head on the parapets of Huzhou. Ugh, I love him so much. Oh my god, Henry, you said evil of Tang Jiuqing to make this moment happen right after, give him back to me. Like, the moment of this happening to Xiaoqie? Goodness, yeah. She's so good at pacing and timing. Like, I don't know the best way to explain it, but I just feel like the way the plot progresses always feels so natural. And it's like, yes, this is the right time for something like this to happen. Hi, Blue. Oh, no worries. Honestly, I almost forgot. I was sitting around at like 2:30 and I was like, wait, I have a stream today. The remaining bandits in Fanzhou and Dongzhou had not yet been eradicated. Who knew what tricks Yan Heru would get up to? Shen Zichuan was too preoccupied at the moment to keep an eye on him, but he had ways to make Yan Heru behave. Yan Heru didn't move a muscle. He meekly swallowed, afraid to even blink. Only once Shen Zichuan turned his horse around did Yan Heru realize his legs were trembling. A soccer falcon knifed through the dancing snow and circled the banks of the Chasha River. The sky at dusk was gloomy, and the snow looked like crushed grains of rice as it scattered over the ground. Snowflakes stuck to Bayim's temples, cold and clammy. The rocky desert stretched endlessly toward the horizon. He sat on his horse, one of his books tucked under one arm, and gazed out into the distance. Blizzard tonight, he muttered in the Bian Sha tongue. The world was a landscape trapped in ice. Even bundled in his furs, Bayim shivered in this cold. Yet Achi was squatting on the frozen Chasha River, washing his face with water from a hole in the ice. His fingers stained the water blood red as he rubbed them clean. I'll send you across the river tonight. A tattooed scorpion crawled up Achi's right arm. His face, as dark as Bayim's, was bluff and honest. Bayim was Ha-Sen's wise man, his advisor. He had initially worked under Hu Helu, but Ha-Sen had transferred him to Achi's squad to observe the Duanzhou battle. He was acting as Ha-Sen's eyes on the ground. Xiao Jie had reached Duanzhou 7 days ago. His brief siege of the city had ended in failure. The Biansha horsemen had learned to use the weapons and equipment inside the walls of Duanzhou. They occupied the city and left Xiao Jie in the cold outside the gates to wear him down. 3 days ago, Xiao Jie had launched a surprise attack. Achi rode out of the city to meet him. He had chased Xiao Jie's forces to the Chasha River, where he destroyed the left flank of the Libei armored cavalry's vanguard. Bayim looked over his shoulder at Achi. Perhaps I should stay a few more days. Ha-Sen needs you. Achi lifted the severed head of a Libei soldier hanging from his belt and stood, calling to the scorpions on the bank of the river. The Libei armored cavalry is on its last legs. These wolves are helpless against us. Last night is proof. They were weak even before the new year, and they're no better now. Achi tossed the head away. The armored cavalry are no longer our trophies. They're not worthy. The scorpions, mingling among the horsemen, followed Achi's lead and booed as they threw away the heads hanging from their saddles. They'd also collected the helmets of the fallen dead to use as chamber pots in the wilderness. Achi turned to Bayim. We are scorpions. It's no good for our Esuhuri to keep us in Zhongbo. Once I kill Xiao Jie, tell Ha-Sen to transfer me back to the northern front. That's where I should be. Amor had left this elite force stationed in Duanzhou. Achi was He Rigu's successor, the leader of the Black Scorpions. After the death of Jida, he had become the undisputed despot of Duanzhou. But if he wanted land of his own, he had to distinguish himself on the battlefield. He was unhappy with Amor's decision to keep him stationed in Duanzhou. You men are the natural predators of the wolf pack, Bayim said to placate him. The Esuhuri has his own considerations, I'm sure. What he's doing is making room for Ha-Sen in the north. Achi's expression was gloomy. Ha-Sen stole the credit from the scorpions. Bayim was on his own out here. He couldn't afford to start a dispute with Achi. He swallowed his frustration and joined Achi as he mounted his horse and stepped back out onto the icy surface of the Chasha River with the scorpions. The Chasha River froze over in winter, its ice solid enough to bear the weight of the horsemen. In the past, they had always preferred to make this crossing in winter and thus avoid a long detour. The slender waist of the Chasha River ran close to Gidal. If they moved fast, they could cross the river in a single night. I forget, were we drinking to waste mentions? Because I saw that phrase and I had that thought in my head and I was like, they're talking about a river. So it doesn't count anyway. But I can't remember. Oh, hi Nina. And I lost my place. The snow was growing heavier. Afraid his book would get wet, Bayim stowed it in his leather satchel. He wore a leather hat and a fur collar wrapped tight around his nose and mouth, but even so, it was so cold his ears were chapped from exposure. Spring had better come soon, Achi said as he rode beside Bayim. Too many in Gidal have died of starvation this winter. All the grain they grew went to the northern front. If Bian Shah wishes to become the king of beasts, these are battles we must fight. We don't have enough farmland, Bayim said, voice muffled by his collar. There's not enough fertile land in the desert. We can only survive by marching westward. Zhongbo is a good place. You needn't hate it so much. If my troops set down their iron hammers, they will once again be reduced to the other tribe's slaves. The iron hammer on Achi's saddle was stained with dried blood. He shook his head. We will not farm. Achi, as the Scorpions' leader, had negotiated with Amor. The Scorpions wanted lands and a name of their own. If possible, they wanted to be acknowledged as part of the 12 tribes, and no longer serve the others. I agree, Blue. You said using the helmets of your fallen enemies as chamber pots sounds so vile and disgusting to me. Not gonna lie, worst thing they've done so far. Yeah, that one's pretty tough. That one's a lot. Amor had refused. He demanded the Scorpions crush the Libe armored cavalry in this battle. Only after Libe fell would he consider Achi's proposal. Bayim was merely part of Hassan's retinue. It wasn't his place to question the great Asuhuri himself, but he understood Amor's intent. Amor was unwilling to give the Scorpions a name because he wanted to control them. Only then would these homeless bastards truly put in the work. The troops rode over the ice for 4 hours. The snowstorm obscured their vision, but the Bian Shah horsemen had left behind plenty of route markers. Achi didn't stop, even in the dark. He wanted to escort Bayim to the opposite bank as soon as possible, then head back to quash the remaining Libe armored cavalry and clean up the Duanzhou battlefield. Xiaoqie hadn't yet made a name for himself, but he was a wolf pup through and through. It was to the regret of all Bian Shah that Hassan hadn't brought back Xiao Fengshu's head. Achi had his gaze locked firmly on Xiaoqie. His head would be the perfect bargaining chip to reopen negotiations with Amor. Bian Shah had spent too long relentlessly attacking Libe. They were fed up with the stalemate on the northern front. Achi wanted to be the one to break it. Bayim moved his fur collar aside and gulped a few mouthfuls of water. The wind and snow made it difficult to even open his eyes. As he recovered his face, he shouted, "Let's stop for now and rest. The snow is too heavy." Unable to fly in the storm, the soccer falcon crouched on its master's shoulder. The wind blew snowdrifts against the ice, which creaked under the hooves with every step. Achi dismounted to scout the path ahead. He scraped away the ice that had formed on the route markers, only to discover footprints in the snow. Given the fierceness of the storm, there were only 2 explanations for these tracks. Either the tread that made them was so heavy it had compacted the snow underneath, or whoever had left them passed this way not long ago and was standing just beside them across the thick curtain of snow. The wolf is coming. Achi estimated the depth of the footprint with a finger, then raised his head. The armored cavalry's been here. Bayim waded through the snow, huffing and puffing as he knelt to look at the footprints. These are heading west, back toward Jiangbo. The footprints were all facing the direction they had come from. 3 days ago, you destroyed the left flank of the Libe armored cavalry. Bayim looked toward Achi, but the vanguard squad is still alive. Xiaoqie likely escaped with them onto the frozen river. They're looking for the way back. It could be a ruse. Achi brushed at the snow. Maybe they walked backward and hid up ahead to lay an ambush. Bayim shook his head, frowning as he stared down at the snow. It does them no good to head east. That's our territory. Achi brushed aside more snow, following the direction of the footprints. They were indeed all heading west. He was well aware of how Xiaoqie had taken Hu Helu down. He was a man adept at deception. The more obvious the footprints, the more certain he was Xiaoqie was right in front of them. We'll take a detour. Achi got to his feet. Even if Xiaoqie stays on the ice, he can't go without water to drink. They'll leave traces. Let's follow their tracks. Bayim chased after Achi. Now wasn't the opportune time to cross swords with the Libe armored cavalry. If we don't stop here to rest, we should at least continue to head east. Achi, Joe has a saying, do not corner a starving dog. Don't get led astray by this. Let's return to Gedal before making any plans. Achi shoved Bayim aside. He lifted his sleeve to expose the scorpion on his right arm, a murderous flame blazing in his eyes. The wolves are right here in the snow. If we let them go now, they'll become a real problem. You have no idea how to fight a war. If we let Xiaoqie remain alive on this river, who's to say he won't ambush my men tomorrow morning? Watching Achi mount his horse, Bayim couldn't help shouting in exasperation. I once advised Hu Helu, but did he listen to me? In the end, he didn't even leave a corpse behind. Was this how you advised Hasen too? Dripping contempt, Achi turned his horse and said, he lost the king wolf's head to preserve his own life. He cracked his whip and took off southeast. Achi! Bayim chased after him for a few steps, then spat onto the ice and cursed. Bastard! You'll lose your way once you leave the route markers. Achi galloped through the snow. If he couldn't find his way on the ice, then, he was certain, neither could Xiaoqie. But of the two of them, he was more familiar with the Chasha River. The wolf was close by, and Achi was going to catch him. Apparently. According to him. That's the end of the chapter. And we are on page 245 for chapter 207, which is called Duped. So, interesting title there. Gujin had lain face down on the ice for an hour now. Hail from the snowstorm pummeled his armor, an irregular staccato beat. He remained motionless. If not for his eagle eyes blinking, Yin Chong would have guessed he'd frozen to death. The old general huddled in the snow, taking small sips from his wineskin. It didn't take long for the skin to run dry. He shook it and tipped the dregs into his mouth. Flying snow pelted his cheeks. The old man's hair and beard were white. Only his nose remained red. The wind howled across the dark, making a terrible din and numbing the tips of their ears. The Imperial Army had eaten the last of their rations hours ago. Their stomachs were hollow, and though their limbs grew stiff after such a long time sprawled in the snow, they rarely moved. Yin Chong turned back to cast a glance at the Imperial Army and marveled. When they had faced the Scorpions a few days ago, the Imperial Army hadn't so much as blinked. Without a word from Xiaoqie, these men wouldn't move a muscle. Who could still associate them with the ruffian soldiers from Chudu, who were only good for manual labor? If the Zizhou garrison troops could be transformed as the Imperial Army had been, then forget Duanzhou. Yin Chong would dare to take on Gedal itself. A pity these were not his soldiers. Yin Chong pouted and tied the wineskin back onto his belt. Snow had accumulated on Gujin's back. His head was bare, and the snow melted on his neck and trickled down into his collar. He was listening for minuscule movements amid the howl of the gale. Fragments of ice swirled and scraped across the drifts. Gujin's hand, pressed into the snow, suddenly clenched into a fist. His eyes bored through the snow flying like sand and locked onto a spot in the darkness. "They're coming." Yin Chong lay flat on the ground and breathed shallowly as the sounds of hoofbeats drew nearer. The old man's palms were sweating. He counted in silence, fearing his legs might start shaking from overexcitement. The snow kicked up by the ponies' hooves turned the fog into thick white clouds. The ponies were so close they were about to stomp on the soldiers' faces. With a thunderous bellow, Yin Chong sprang up from the ground. The enemy suddenly stopped. Yin Chong's blade was still only half out of his sheath when a scorpion's hammer swung toward him, passing inches from his face. Yin Chong didn't have the arm strength of a brute like Li Xiong. He didn't dare block the blow. He dropped and rolled in the snow, dodging gracelessly. "Motherfucker, that's a good swing," Yin Chong cursed as he steadied himself. The Imperial Army soldiers leapt out of the snow behind him. Initially, they had wanted to imitate Yin Chong and spring up in one suave move, but on seeing the old man bested, they gave up the idea and drew their blades without the fanfare. The instant the scorpions swung their hammers, they knew they had fallen for the trap. This wasn't the Li Bei armored cavalry at all, but a bunch of imposters in helmets. "Helmets off!" Gu Jin grabbed for the saddle of a pony speeding past him. Feet scraping across the fallen snow. He slammed the hilt of his blade hard into the side of the rider, then clambered up and seized his mount. He called again sternly, "Helmets off!" Helmets clattered to the snow as the Imperial Army darted into the group of horsemen like a nest of mice. They didn't care where the Bian Sha soldiers tried to run, as long as they could startle the Bian Sha ponies. The snow under their hooves was loose. It scattered as a net was pulled up, toppling a number of Bian Sha mounts. Snow and sand flew into the enemy's faces. Achi's soldiers swallowed mouthfuls of ice and snow as they tumbled. The Imperial Army's blades were short. Once they closed in on the scorpions, the iron hammers lost their effectiveness. Whether the scorpions swung them wide or held them in tight, the Imperial Army's blades were faster, giving their enemy no time at all to parry the blows. Gu Jin scanned the battlefield, but saw no sign of Achi. His heart sank. Before he could call a warning, a line of Bian Sha horsemen came bolting out of the snow on his left. So fast Gu Jin had no time to dodge. The vicious beast seemed to have materialized out of thin air. It clamped its teeth on the Imperial Army, breaking them up into disconnected pieces. The new unit didn't wield iron hammers. In their swift and ferocious advance, they knocked Gu Jin right off his stolen pony. As Gu Jin hit the ground, the pony screeched in agony. Hot blood sprayed his face. Blue, you said, "I do like how Tong Ching insists on reminding us that Yin Chong is Old Man Rudolph every 3 mentions." Yeah. You will remember this man is old. Old and unwashed. Sneaks. Achi rebuked Gu Jin in the Zhou tongue. He brandished his scimitar and flung droplets of blood onto Gu Jin. "But that's all you are." The scimitars of Achi's elite scorpions were larger than those used by the rest of the Bian Sha horsemen. In their hands, the weapons looked like thick, silver hooks. Get caught by that deadly curve, and human and beast alike would meet their end. Achi had smelled a rat even as he was following the trail. There were far too many clues exposing the enemy's presence. Very quickly, Achi's wind-blown brain had calmed. He'd sent his scouts ahead to probe, and sure enough, they had baited the Imperial Army out of hiding. Gu Jin wiped blood off his face and answered lightly, "Is that so?" On the other side of the tussle, Yin Chong had given up resistance entirely. Surrounded by horsemen, he spread his arms, half crouching as if he was about to lift something as he called at the top of his lungs, "Up we go!" The layer of ice under the pony's hooves quaked. Worried the Imperial army had smashed a hole in the river, the scorpions reined their horses around and nervously retreated. The instant they did, Yin Chong and the Imperial army dropped and rolled. They sprang back out between the horses' hooves, then picked up their blades and took to their heels. "We've been had." Achi's fury blazed, and he let loose a string of Zhou and Biancha expletives. But he didn't give chase. He still had his wits about him, and he was certain there was another trap somewhere. Only when Yin Chong and the Imperial army were almost out of sight did it finally hit him. They were really fucking fleeing. Split up and give chase. Achi cracked his whip in the air. Hack off their heads. The scorpions split into two flanks with Achi at the center, a sharp claw of a formation intent on trapping the Imperial army within its grasp. The two flanks raced ahead on either side of the fleeing Imperial army. Once they joined up, they would have the enemy completely surrounded. When Achi led the center unit to charge with their scimitars from behind, it would be a slaughterhouse. 7 years ago, Amor had used this exact formation to ram the Duanzhou garrison troops into the Chasha sinkhole. Achi, thus inspired, was especially fond of it. He'd used the same method to shred the left flank of the Libe armored cavalry near Duanzhou a few days ago. The two flanks, riding hard, had already overtaken the Imperial army, which was fleeing on foot. They turned their horses, both sides curling like serpents toward the patch of ice in front of the Imperial army, intending to block their path. A familiar figure stood in their way. Battle steeds appeared around him, silent in the mist. White puffs of steam curled from their iron muzzles, their armor fearsome in the pitch-black night. The armored cavalry towered, motionless, on horseback, looming amid the raging snow and wind, their silence a wall that seemed to shut out the sounds of battle. The men leading both flanks of the horsemen's formation had crossed swords with the armored cavalry before. They were not afraid, so no one called for them to stop. The ponies kicked up snowy haze as they charged from both sides in a pincer attack, while the scorpions at the forefront swapped their scimitars for hammers. They would knock the armored cavalry off their horses with one swing of their hammer, just as they'd done so many times before, relying on the swiftness of their horses and the strength of their arms to crush their enemies' helmets. Xiao Qie sat atop Snowcrest, which was pawing at the ground with its hooves. He was clad in heavy armor. No one could see what expression he wore behind the steel. He was a stabilizing force amid the chaos of this battlefield, steadying the morale of the soldiers before and behind him. Gujin exhaled the instant he saw Xiao Qie. He skidded to a stop at almost the same time as Yin Chong. The two of them turned around amid the pummeling snow to square off against Achi's pursuing soldiers. The wind stirred up by the Biancha horsemen swept across the river of ice. Their scimitars and hammers had hunted the men of Great Zhou from Libe to Zhongbo. No one could survive under their hooves. Xiao Qie hissed a breath of hot air from between thin lips. The scorpions on both flanks raised their hammers. But before they could bring them down, the smell of gunpowder assailed their noses. Flashes of light exploded in the snowstorm. The scorpions, caught wholly off guard, were blown out of their saddles, while the horses collided in panic upon hearing the thunderous blast of the muskets. Finally, we have the gun warfare. We have guns on our side. We have the surprise guns. Oh, Blue, interesting. This scene was what made me feel like I was reading an extended and more convoluted version of Capri the most so far. I love this scene so much. Yes, like, I see what you mean. The way the battle is described, but it's just like a longer scene. You saw that, Henry, you saw that Rebecca Black sticker. Yes, I actually met her. I saw her live. It was very cool. Smoke poured from the brass muzzles. Xiaoqia had only brought 30 of these weapons. They were of little use against the main forces of Biansha, but key to blowing the heads off these two flanking serpents at this moment. Their explosive power blindsided the leaders of both squads, while the scorpions at the rear had no idea what had happened. Xiaoqia moved, and the Libe armored cavalry behind him followed suit, bearing glistening new fangs. These heavily armored soldiers were like vicious wolves let out of their cages, eyes glowing green with hunger. They split into neat columns and leveled their broadswords to face the enemy. Yeah, Henry, she was actually opening for another band, and I was not there to see that band. And when she was done, she was just like out and about. I'm pretty sure she was like at her own merch table, actually. So it was really easy to just like go up and like say hi to her. And yeah, where's the art of him shooting a gun? I agree, we need that. I don't... It looks like there's art coming up in a few pages, but I don't think it's of this. So I'm kind of disappointed, because I need some gun art with him. Sorry, I keep responding to messages and I keep losing my place. Okay. They split into neat columns and leveled their broadswords to face the enemy. From his position behind the Imperial army, Achi had already seen the armored cavalry's blades. It was too late for scorpions at the flanks to pick up their hammers again. Li Bei's battle steeds raised their hooves and trampled the tumbling bodies, blood spraying onto their armor. More scorpions surged up to take the place of their fallen comrades. Xiaoqia shrank the Li Bei armored cavalry into a war chariot formation that barreled into the enemy. Blades bristled on all four sides, preventing the hammers from getting close. The armored cavalry resembled a battering ram as they charged through the battlefield. Xiaoqia rode at the apex of this formation. When they joined together like this, the cavalry was an unstoppable force. Reining in the battle steed beneath him, Achi snarled, "Swing your hammers." Surely, as long as they had their iron hammers, the Li Bei armored cavalry would be tofu all the same. That's such a funny way to put it. A scorpion's hammer whistled toward the head of a cavalryman at the fringe of the formation. It was too late to avoid the attack. An ear-splitting clang rang out. Heirigu had deflected the hammer with his own from atop the back of one of Li Bei's horses. "Traitorous bastard!" Achi gnashed his teeth in rage. "Heirigu, you've become Li Bei's slave." With a swiftness that belied the hammer's weight, Heirigu swung it up and knocked his opponent off his horse, then jumped to the ground as the scorpion landed. While his opponent was still cussing in the snow, Heirigu swung his hammer down onto the man's skull with barely a glance. Achi's center unit faced a dilemma. His left and right flanks were flailing aimlessly, their serpent heads hacked off by the musket fire. And with the Imperial army blocking his way, he could no longer direct the two flanks to retreat. It was at this point that Baim galloped onto the scene. He knew well Achi's importance to Duanzhou. The remaining scorpions and Zhongbo all heeded this man. He couldn't abandon Achi to escape on his own. Baim panted in the snow as he surveyed the battlefield. "Achi, retreat. The Li Bei armored cavalry can't catch us." As long as they followed the route markers westward, by daybreak at the latest, they would return to the southeast of Duanzhou, where they'd stationed a large number of troops. At that point, all that awaited Xiaoqia would be death. I just had a thought. Is it possible that that the Li Bei armored cavalry could mess with their route markers and make them think they're going the right way and they're not. Just a thought. I don't know how obvious that would be or how you would do that. I don't really know what the route markers like are, but I'm just thinking that seems like a strategic thing that someone could do, so I don't know. Achi tugged viciously on his horse's reins and cracked his whip, but he didn't refute Bayim again as he led his remaining scorpions to fall back and away from the Imperial army. He knew his priorities. If he lost to Xiaoqie here, Amor would punish him harshly. There would already be hell to pay for his rash actions tonight. His defeat here was a small matter, but if his carelessness lost them Duanzhou, then even if he survived to escape back to Gadal, Amor would have his life. This battle didn't count. Achi whipped his horse hard to spur it on. He'd merely been duped. That's the end of the chapter. What am I reading today? Okay. So, we're on page 253 for chapter 208. Return of a Nightmare. Return of a Nightmare. So the sinkhole is a nightmare. So that's, like, where my mind goes. But I don't really know what that means in this context. In panic, Achi fled back the way they'd come. The scorpions loosed their soccer falcons into the storm. Snowcrest pressed forward, galloping after them amid the clang of metal on metal. The thunderous hoofbeats of the Libe armored cavalry bearing down on them unnerved the scorpions, who feared the ice beneath their feet would crack. No matter how fast they ran, the sound seemed to be right at their backs. Grinding his teeth in humiliation, Achi turned into the wind to look back, but all he could see was a single set of heavy armor. Xiaoqie. Bayim yanked on his reins. He knocked his horse's flank against Achi's and barked, "Retreat! Retreat! Achi, stop looking at him!" The snow fell like scattered petals, transforming the world into a pristine and sacred realm. The Biansha horsemen charged madly with the wind at their backs for almost an hour before they managed to throw off the Libe armored cavalry. Even then, they didn't dare stop. When they reached their original path, Bayim called, "Pull out the route markers. Don't leave them behind for Xiaoqie." They charged westward with everything they had, pulling up the markers as they went. "We'll deploy troops to strike back at them tomorrow morning." Bayim's fur collar was pulled all the way up. His lashes dyed white by the storm. He could barely keep his eyes open. Xiaoqie won't escape the Chasha River if he loses his way in this storm. Achi was livid. His rage blazed so hot it scorched his chest. He had been played for a fool by Xiaoqie even before they came face to face. No matter what, he couldn't take this lying down. "Listen, Achi." Bayim chased after the lightning-swift Achi. Tugging down his fur collar, he shouted, "Don't fall for his goading, you hear me? He's doing it on purpose." "He wiped out my men." Unable to contain himself, Achi screamed back at Bayim. "He's taking me for a fucking ride. That son of a bitch." 3 days ago, Achi had taken down Xiaoqie's left flank, and today, Xiaoqie had stood there without a word and blown up Achi's left and right flanks. The leaders of both had been elite soldiers. Achi's heart was dripping blood. This was a warning from Xiaoqie, a threat rubbed in his face. "I'm going to kill him," Achi growled. "I'll kill." Bayim knocked Achi off his horse with a single punch. Having lost its master, the horse slowed to a stop a few paces ahead. Achi rolled in the snow, his chest heaving. "The Esuhuri knows all. If you want the scorpions to be taken into the 12 tribes, then finish Xiaoqie off tomorrow morning," Bayim said somberly. "Lose your mind now, and you'll be reduced to a jackal. A jackal can't bite a wolf to death. Clear your head. Lying on the ground, Achi grabbed a handful of snow and wiped his face. He climbed to his feet and remounted his horse without a word. The atmosphere among the Biansha soldiers was glum. Achi and Bayim seemed to no longer be on speaking terms, and those behind them dared not open their mouths. They galloped through the storm for another 2 hours, their horses huffing with exhaustion, before the route markers indicated they had reached the riverbank. Our falcons will notify the reinforcements. Achi slowed his horse to a trot and guided it onto the bank. We can wait here. Bayim was still uneasy. He was a man who kept to himself, and thus took particular notice of his environment. The endless snow obstructed the world from view. He couldn't see anything more than a few steps from where they stood. Even so, he could keenly sense that this was not the southeastern side of Duanzhou whence they came. We went the wrong way, Bayim muttered, squinting into the gale. Between sheets of blowing snow, he caught an indistinct glimpse of what lay ahead. This place is... A horse at the rear, that had yet to step ashore, suddenly lost its footing, its hind legs sliding into a hole in the ice. The scorpion on its back yanked uselessly at the reins amid the blinding snowstorm. In a panic, the horse broke its hind knees against the edge of the ice and screamed as its entire body crashed into the water. The unit was promptly thrown into disarray. The ponies spooked, and the scorpions berated them to no avail. Fearing they would slide in too, they thrashed at the ponies' flanks with their whips. Achi heard the clink of heavy armor amid the chaos. At first, he thought he'd misheard, but soon enough, the dark silhouettes of the armored cavalry loomed out of the snow. No matter how battle-addled Achi was, he'd caught on by now. Spurring his horse, he shouted, "Mount your horses. Run." The route markers were genuine enough, but Xiaojia had long shifted them away from their original locations. The footprints had indeed been a ruse, but Xiaojia's true intent had been to lead them here. I can't wait to see what that art in a few pages is. I can tell that there's art because there's like a single dark page edge, and I'm very excited. Not big brain E. I guess I had a big brain moment about Ballad of Sword and Wine. It's just like, you put down something like, oh, the route, we have to follow the route markers, and I'm like, at this point I've gotten used to the kinds of, like, war strategies that they're using, and I was just like, hold on a minute. If you mention that, there's gonna be something going on with it. Seeing Bayim hadn't moved, Achi shoved into him and cursed, "On your horse! Snap the fuck out of it!" Holding utterly still, Bayim glanced at Achi from the corner of his eye. Finally sensing something amiss, Achi looked up. The color drained from his face. The stretch of darkness ahead of them was none other than the Chasha sinkhole. Can I like clap or something? I don't know. I'm just like, we're here again, but in a very different context. So it's a return of a nightmare, but maybe for the Biansha instead of Xiaoqia and his people. As at this point, I think we all deserve a drink. Achi wiped sweat from his temples and peered through the snow, only to see that the Libe armored cavalry had already silently flanked them. He turned back and spied Xiaoqia. 7 years ago, the Biansha horsemen had slaughtered 30,000 men from the Duanzhou garrison troops here. Now, 7 years later, On a stormy night much like that one, Xiaoqia had used the same battle formation to herd them toward the Chasha sinkhole. Achi had never met Xiaoqia off the battlefield, but in this instant, he thought he understood the man's intent. Bayim's throat bobbed. Clutching his leather-bound book, he muttered the words Hassan had once spoken. Returning the favor, an eye for an eye. Xiaoqia was the toughest wolf to deal with. By now, Bayim understood he would have bitten Hassan to death to retrieve Xiao Fengshu's head. An opponent like this remembered the source of each and every scar. He would make his own chances and tear madly into his foes with his fangs. His enemies would never escape unscathed. Reinforcements are on their way. Achi was surprisingly calm. He watched Xiaoqia without blinking. Hold the line until they arrive, and this battle will still be ours to win. Achi couldn't see Xiaoqia's face, but even through that helmet, he sensed his derision. Achi didn't believe in the Biansha gods. His own tattoo was his only totem. He was a scorpion surviving between the cracks. He wouldn't concede defeat until the moment his head left his body. But Xiaoqia also believed in his tattoo. It represented his father and his Li Bei. The scar Hassan had left on his shoulder had never stopped burning. He had suppressed his sorrow and fury too long, so long he could hear Wolfsfang howling in its sheath. Under the snowy dome of the sky, the violent gale rode roughshod over the snowbanks, tearing them into flakes like catkins flying in the wind. In the moment before white blotted out his vision, Achi saw the armored cavalry charge. Their armored figures were like swords covered in dust. But in the next moment, as they crashed toward the Biansha horsemen like a mountainous wave, that armor seemed to have shaken off all its disguise. All that remained were sharp edges, glinting coldly in the night, their brilliance finally unmasked. The instant the first iron hammer swung down, Xiaoqia parried with Wolfsfang. Snowcrest didn't even slow. The armored cavalry crashed head-on into the Biansha horsemen, blade screeching against blade. Snowcrest, clad in heavy armor, tossed its head and knocked aside a pony standing in its way. The Biansha horsemen were like a water skin crushed until it burst. Under Xiaoqia's heavy onslaught, their resistance crumbled within the blink of an eye as the war chariot formation rammed them backward. The sinkhole lay just behind them. If they retreated another step, they would plunge into its depths. Achi lifted the iron hammer that weighed 100 caddies. Within this short clash, he had come to realize that Xiaoqia was the most vital part of the Li Bei armored cavalry. He knocked the cavalryman off his mount with the swing of his hammer and heard the man's head slam into the snow with a thud. His horse sidestepped over the body, and a second later, his hammer was streaking toward Xiaoqia's face. It passed through empty air. Achi had thought Xiaoqia would press his victory, but he did not. He fell back toward the rest of the Li Bei armored cavalry, and the war chariot formation underwent a transformation. Bayim, hovering at the back with his book in his arms, had a clear view as the cavalry reformed. Was this really the Li Bei armored cavalry? It was clearly a heavy-duty war chariot. Xiaoqia was unwilling to give up Xiao Fengshu's heavy armor. He didn't want to prove his old man wrong. After speaking to Lu Guangbai, Qi Juyin, and Yin Chang, he devised an entirely new approach to cavalry battles. He retained the heavy weight, but cast away the long broadswords of the former Li Bei armored cavalry. This Li Bei armored cavalry was equipped with new blades. They were single-edged sabers like before, but their blades were so long there was no way for the iron hammers to get close. I remember them talking about this idea at some point. I think it was like somebody, who was it? I guess it was Lu Guangbai and his people. They were like, oh, we got longer spears, or like we got longer ends on our spears. Yes. Improvise, adapt, overcome. Blue, exactly. He had observed Lu Guangbai's infantrymen on the battlefield. Yep. What they lacked in speed, they made up for with the solidity of their war chariot formation. Xiaoqia had eliminated any need to chase those swift ponies. He wanted the Bianshao horsemen to come to them. That battle Qi Juyin had fought in Li Bei was skillful in its swap between light and heavy cavalry. Xiaoqia thus paired the Li Bei armored cavalry with the imperial army. When they appeared on the same battlefield, their strategies would be erratic and unpredictable. Even the adaptable Ha Sen would no longer reign supreme in the wilderness. But the last and most crucial influence was Yin Chang's dagger squad. Yin Chang had modified Lu Guangbai's war chariot formation by splitting the soldiers into narrow, dagger-like columns for quick attacks. He Rigu had learned this move on the sly, and thus given Xiaoqia yet another source of inspiration at the Beiyuan training grounds. He incorporated the daggers into his war chariot. This was the current Li Bei armored cavalry, a force of formidable and shocking might. Very quickly, Achi came to understand that their iron hammers were useless. They could not avoid the long blades to get within swinging distance of the Li Bei armored cavalry. But when he swapped the iron hammers for scimitars, the Li Bei armored cavalry would strike out in sharp columns like bayonets springing from a box, piercing the scorpions until their formations were in tatters. These shining blades extended and retracted at will. Yes, Blue, you said, I love how much he's learning from everybody and adapting it into the needs of his army. It's great. And yeah, Henry, you're correct. He may be unwashed and disgusting, but by God, does Yin Chang know war. Oh no, Xiao Fengshu would be so proud. Oh. This approach was like a heavy-duty war chariot that had discarded the cumbersome wooden structure of common siege weapons and been completely reforged in iron and steel. It was faster, more responsive. If Xiaoqia commanded it, they could even dismantle their formation on the spot and break out into field squads to lay ambushes. Although this nascent force was still rough around the edges, it was undoubtedly a Li Bei armored cavalry that belonged to Xiaoqia alone. Achi saw defeat looming before his eyes, but then he heard falcons' cries from within the storm. His soccer falcon folded its wings and dove down from the heavens, heralding the reinforcements he had long been waiting for. Henry, I see your, my blade is expanding message. Why are there so many of them? Yin Chang had been about to sit on the ground to pour the bloody water from his boots when he saw riders swarming like ants from the southwest. He clambered to his feet and stomped back into his boots. We're doomed. Those are almost 3 times our fucking numbers. Cool. Okay. That's great. Oh wait, did I skip anything? Sorry, I did not take ADHD meds today. I don't know if I skipped a paragraph or not. If someone can tell me. The Achi saw defeat looming before his eyes. Did I read that out loud? Oh, I don't know. It's I trust you enough even though you're sleep deprived, Blue, because like I feel like I didn't. Let me just go back. Achi saw defeat looming before his eyes, but then he heard a falcon's cries from within the storm. His soccer falcons folded its wings and dove down from the heavens, heralding the reinforcements he had long been waiting for. Why are there so many of them? Yin Chang had been about to sit on the ground to pour the bloody water from his boots when he saw riders swarming like ants from the southwest. He clambered to his feet and stomped back into his boots. We're doomed. Those are almost 3 times our fucking numbers. The scorpions' morale instantly soared. The sounds of killing crashed over them in waves as the two armies engaged in a battle of life and death before the Chasha sinkhole. Blood glittered where it splashed over the snow. The Libe armored cavalry and Imperial army were giving everything they had. This was their only chance to break out of the Biansha troops' encirclement. If they missed the opportunity tonight, they were as good as dead. Gu Jin lifted He Rigu by the back of his collar and kicked him into the melee. Seeing Yin Chong limping, he brandished his blade to ward off the Biansha soldiers and shouted to the old man, "Elder Yin, are you hurt?" Yin Chong wrinkled his red nose and fidgeted in discomfort. My foot's itching from this damp." He Rigu nimbly dodged scimitars. Every now and then, he had to flash his little golden token to the Imperial army, who had gone mad with bloodlust, and shout, "We're on the same side!" Oh my goodness. The way that he's, like, in this battle and they're trying to attack him, because I realize. On the other end of the battlefield, Achi, far more adept with the scimitar than the hammer, had locked blades with Xiao Jie. The ground shook under the pounding of boots and hooves. No one saw who fell from their horse first, but within moments, the entire edge of the sinkhole crumbled away, sending men and horses tumbling into the muck. The Imperial army spat out mouthfuls of sludge and popped their heads up over the dense mass of enemies, shouting at each other, "Fuck, did Arya fall down there too?" Snowcrest was knee-deep in mud at the bottom of the pit. Achi scrambled up onto a rock and sprang toward them. Unable to find his footing in time, Xiaoqia lifted one leg to kick Achi in the chest. As Achi reeled back, Xiaoqia was already on his feet. The hammer came swinging for his face, and Xiaoqia dodged, bringing up his arm guard to ward off the blow. We're in the pit now? Xiaoqia was not supposed to fall in the pit. Or we're like, what? Okay. There's a scene break. Henry, I actually understood that reference. Oh no. Crack. Frostfall smashed through an old wooden fence as Shen Zichuan galloped through the blizzard, his cloak snapping in the wind. Flakes of ice danced before his eyes, accentuating the sharp, forbidding harshness of his gaze. Fei Sheng, aware that they were entering the battlefield, rode only a few lengths behind Shen Zichuan's horse with the embroidered uniform guard. Tantai Hu didn't dare let Shen Zichuan take the lead on his own. He led his own troops after the prefectural governor, with such haste he was practically standing on his saddle. He shouted at Shen Zichuan through the gale, "Your lordship, the northeast, the Chasha sinkhole." Plumes of snow flew from under his horse's hooves. Shen Zichuan's reins were soaked with sweat from his grip. He hadn't made a single stop along the way. Frostfall was already flagging under him. The Chasha sinkhole. The world Shen Zichuan had passed on his way was a boundless expanse of white wilderness. But the moment he entered the vicinity of the Chasha sinkhole, his nightmare surged to the surface like a tidal wave, and the familiar stench of blood choked his nose and throat. Shen Zichuan gasped for air, unable to spot Xiaoqia in the chaos. I didn't know that Shen Zichuan was going to end up here too. So for him, this really is the return of his nightmare. Like, he has to come back to it as well. I thought maybe it would just be like Xiaoqia in this place experiencing some aspect of the nightmare that Shen Zichuan had, but it's like, no, he's here too. Shen Zichuan let out a fierce cry. "Xiao Zaan!" Looking around, Fei Sheng spotted Yin Chong, who in turn caught sight of the prefectural governor clad in bloodless white. Oh god, the art... Okay, we're not looking at that yet. Conspicuous in the darkness. He jumped up and down, waving his blade. "The sinkhole! In the sinkhole! Arya's in the sinkhole!" Shen Zichuan's face drained ghastly white. limbs ice cold. He half rolled off the horse. Even his hands were trembling as he gripped Avalanche. Blood seeped up the hem of his white robe, staining it crimson as he stepped over corpses. His vision was filled with the sinkhole that had appeared in his nightmares 1,000,000 times. He had no eyes for anything else. Heavy snow veiled the sky. He stumbled to the edge of the sinkhole and slid down, voice trembling as he shouted, "Shouts on!" Nightmare and reality overlapped. Shen Zichuan had seen his own body strewn among the corpses, but even in his nightmares, Xiao Qie had never been among the bodies lying here. She's got a new nightmare now, I guess. Fei Sheng had never seen the prefectural governor in such a state. He hurried over to help him up, but Shen Zichuan pushed him aside. Wading through that sea of blood, he pulled up the corpses piled around Snowcrest one by one, dragging them away so desperately his hands grew slippery with blood. One of these limp bodies suddenly raised a hand and grasped Shen Zichuan's wrist. "Lanzhou." Xiao Qie's voice was muffled inside the helmet. Shen Zichuan had already shoved the helmet off him. In that swirling snow, he got a clear look at Xiao Qie's face. With no regard for the filth, he wrapped his arms tightly around Xiao Qie's head. Xiao Qie reached up and stroked Shen Zichuan's back. He wanted to speak, but amid the soughing of the wind, he only heard Shen Zichuan cry softly over and over, "Xiao Qie, Xiao Qie." Xiao Qie felt his heart shatter into pieces. We're looking at art. It's kind of hard to see them clearly. I do like the choice of, like, really showing how dark it is. And that there's just piles of dead bodies. It's so dark and bleak. No, blue, no regard for the filth, not even its remnants. Every time. Oh, that's the end of the chapter. It's 4:09. It's time for me to take a break. When we come back, we will be on page 265 for chapter 209, which is called Embrace. God, so I didn't think about this possibility. Not only did Xiao Qie come to the sinkhole, which is sort of like, there's something poetic about him experiencing, like, the horrible thing that his partner experienced. Like, the person you love has nightmares about this thing, and you know how bad it was, but you don't really know what it was like because you weren't there. And now he, like, gets to experience some part of this thing for real. But not only that, but Shen Zichuan has to go back to it, too. So, I guess they get to experience it together. But yeah, I'm gonna take a break and process that. And we'll be back in, like, 10 minutes. Hi, hello, I'm back. I'm back and I guess I'm ready. I must be ready for whatever happens next. We're in the pit, we're still in the pit. We are on page 265, chapter 209, Embrace. Shen Zichuan's nights were filled with the Chasha sinkhole. When he'd first entered the Temple of Guilt, the interior had been old and dilapidated, the walls set with broken windows that couldn't keep out the chilly wind. Jigong had saved the only sheltered corner for him, and still he would lie with his head pillowed on his arms, not daring to tell his Shifu he couldn't sleep. Back then, Shen Zichuan could still remember Jimu's face. There were shadows of Hua Pingting and his older brother, a handsome man with features as elegant as his own. Wait, sorry, I read that wrong. A handsome man with features as elegant as his mother's. The traffic from neighbors clamoring to play matchmaker for him while he still lived at home was enough to wear down the steps outside their house. All I've been thinking about these days is my promotion. In Shen Zichuan's memory, Jimu squatted in the courtyard, eating dumplings from a bowl in his hand. We can move to the east side once I'm promoted. Imitating him, Shen Zichuan stuffed himself until his cheeks were bulging. He nodded and said around a mouthful of dumplings, "I'll watch over sister-in-law for you." There was a girl. She and Jimu had known each other since they were children. She had originally lived next door to them, then later moved to the eastern side of the city. The girl's father was a social climber, always thinking of marrying his daughter off to someone in the local government. Jimu had joined the garrison to prove himself worthy, working day and night at his official duties, hoping to wed the maiden before she was married off. Jigong didn't earn much. Their family was not well off. With 2 sons to raise, Hua Pingting saved her own dowry as funds for the boys' future weddings. Once Jimu came of age, she and Jigong started calculating the cost of engaging a matchmaker. Winter in Duanzhou was vast and empty. The Chasha River lay to the east. When the boys were just a little younger, they had gone onto the ice in winter to pull sleds. Shen Zichuan had always been a clever child. He coaxed the little rascals who tagged along to play the horses while he played the lord sitting on the sled, directing them to drag him all over the place. That's so cute. My little brother will surely go far in life. This was something Jimu told their father often. Hua Pingting treated Shen Zichuan as her own blood son, and so Jimu treated Shen Zichuan as his own little brother. When Xiao Jie and Xiao Jiming were growing up in Libei, riding horses and drawing bows, Shen Zichuan was tramping with Jimu all over the mountains and plains. Shen Zichuan was sloppy in his training with G-style boxing until he was 15, but Jimu always covered for him. He refused to let Hua Pingting admonish the boy. In the 3rd year of the reign of Xiande, Jimu was promoted to squad commander. The entire family was overjoyed. Hua Pingting started making arrangements, counting the family's savings over and over as she and Jigong prepared to hire a matchmaker to propose marriage to the maiden on the east side of the city. That night, Jimu had the evening rotation. Shen Zichuan took the food Hua Pingting packed and ran over to the garrison to deliver a meal to his brother. It was the last time Shen Zichuan saw Hua Pingting. His Xinyang stopped him at the entrance of the courtyard and buttoned up the padded jacket for him. She fastened his fur collar, bundling him up securely. He left to the familiar refrain of her instructions. Hurry there and back. Jimu secretly gave Shen Zichuan some wine, and Shen Zichuan drank it by dipping his chopsticks in and sucking on them, looking very much like a plump little radish wrapped in his thick jacket among a row of strapping soldiers. The snow fell, and those rugged men said it was an auspicious omen. Duanzhou would have a bountiful harvest next year. Jimu rapped his chopsticks on the porcelain bowl and sang the tune, a song for peaceful and tranquil times. Ooh, and there's a footnote. The second footnote of the entire book, by the famous Tang Dynasty poet Li Bai. He was only 20 that year, and about to bring home a pretty wife. He and his brother got along harmoniously, and their parents were free from illness and worry. These should have been the best days of his life. Whenever Shen Zichuan thought back to that night, tears streamed down his cheeks. He had lost the courage to reminisce since his days in the Temple of Guilt. He no longer dreamed of those times. Jimu was a grotesque skeleton in the nightmares that had plagued him for the past 7 years. He had long forgotten what his elder brother looked like. He couldn't even remember their last conversation. Why didn't he pull Jimu up? In so many dreams, Shen Zichuan had crawled his way out of the sinkhole, then fallen back in again. For the first few years, he would sink into the pit and burst out sobbing. But at some point since then, Shen Zichuan had left himself behind in the pit. Now when his dreams took him here, he stood silently and watched as the snow buried him. Army boots trod upon the snow, creaking as they drew near. Face blank, Shen Zichuan looked over his shoulder and saw a travel-worn Jimu. Tonight, he was clean and uninjured. Resting a hand on the hilt of his saber, he closed the distance between them. Jimu hadn't changed at all after 7 years. His cheeks were pink from the cold, and as he walked, he cupped his hands and huffed warm air into them. All the hostility of their struggle in the sea of blood had vanished without a trace. Shen Zichuan looked at him and remembered him singing "Song for Peaceful and Tranquil Times" the day he departed. He was now as tall as Jimu. He called out wearily, "Guh." Jimu came to a stop before Shen Zichuan. The wind tousled the hair around his face. "Why aren't you going home?" "There's too much snow," Shen Zichuan answered. "I lost my way." Jimu laughed. "Silly kid. Mama's looking for you." Shen Zichuan looked back and saw Hua Pingting standing not far off. His Xinyang carried a lantern in the heavy snow, and the hem of her skirt rippling in the wind. As he watched her, the tears coursed down his face. He remembered everything. That was why he wanted to forget it all. Hand steady on the hilt of his blade, Jimu passed through Shen Zichuan and walked toward Hua Pingting. Unable to stop himself, Shen Zichuan shouted, "Guh!" He made a desperate attempt to grab Jimu, but his brother didn't turn back. Shen Zichuan chased after him. With every step he took, the blood under his feet rose an inch. He broke into a run, but he couldn't break free of the bonds that held him back. He fell into the pool of blood, limbs tangled in the corpses. He shouted himself hoarse as Jimu walked farther away. "Come back." Jimu was about to vanish into the snow. Shen Zichuan's fingers scrabbled without purchase as the blood rose up and swallowed him within the sinkhole. The terror of drowning gripped him. He couldn't breathe. All he could do was struggle and look on helplessly as that faint light slowly died out. "Shen Lanzhou!" Xiao Qie gathered him into his arms. His broad shoulders could withstand the very worst of the storm. He brought with him the light of the blazing sun. He was the bracing gale that swept this dark, gloomy landscape clean and dispelled the tempest. This close, the scorching heat of him filled the world, burning Shen Zichuan and leaving no room for anything else. Shen Zichuan jolted awake, his clothes drenched with sweat. Xiao Qie cupped his cheeks and touched the tips of their noses together in the darkness. He kissed him softly, as if to soothe him. Still gasping for breath, Shen Zichuan wrapped his arms around Xiao Qie's neck, blinking tears from his eyes as they clung to each other. "Come back, Lanzhou." Xiaoqia leaned in closer to coax him. Come back to me. Heart still pounding, Shen Zichuan nodded. He touched their foreheads together, his eyes wide with panic as he gazed at Xiaoqia. Xiaoqia swiped his thumbs across the corner of his eyes and caressed his cheeks. Everything's fine now. Xiaoqia gave him another soft kiss, and then another. Just hug me tight. They were in a military tent. The weak fire in the charcoal brazier had gone cold in the middle of the night. The two of them shared a simple plank bed padded with a thin mattress. A cloak was their only blanket. Fearing Lanzhou would fall sick, Xiaoqia grabbed his icy hands and stuffed them into his own outer robes, pressing them flat against his chest. Okay, that's fascinating. We just went into, like... I thought we were going to, like, see them get rescued from the pit or get out of the pit, like, on the page. And it was like, no, we're just gonna fast forward. And, like, kind of time feels weird and wobbly because of, like, nightmares and trauma stuff. So it makes sense. So the second he held Xiaoqia and confirmed he was alive and well, he passed out. Apparently. Yeah, we went into the flashback right with Shen Zichuan and are emerging out of it with him. I love how it was narrated, too. Shen Zichuan's breathing evened as he grasped at the material of Xiaoqia's inner robe until it wrinkled. Not once did Xiaoqia's arms loosen around him. They huddled together beneath the cloak as he whispered to Shen Zichuan, Are you cold? Shen Zichuan buried his face in Xiaoqia's neck and murmured, Yeah. Xiaoqia held him tighter, tucking the crown of Shen Zichuan's head under his chin. Eyes half-lidded, he said, Come a little closer. You won't be cold anymore. They clung to each other for warmth, like a pair of cubs curled around each other for survival. Shen Zichuan felt his way around to Xiaoqia's back, his icy cold touch making Xiaoqia suck a breath through his teeth. Shen Zichuan's mind only calmed once his fingers reached the wolf on Xiaoqia's back. He caressed it carefully, as though stroking soft fur. Xiaoqia's back was taut with muscles. Shen Zichuan's touch tickled, but there was nowhere for him to move on the narrow bed. He had no choice but to tilt his head back and endure the waves of tingling numbness rippling down his spine. When he could no longer bear it, he took hold of Shen Zichuan's wrist and turned over to pin him down beneath him. He pressed up against Shen Zichuan and held his body there, breathing faster than before. Shen Zichuan sulked. Didn't you want me to hug you? Is that what you call hugging? Xiaoqia pressed closer, then repeated his question, his voice gone low. You call that hugging? His voice sounded like it had escaped from the deepest part of his chest. Shen Zichuan looked up archly, as if struck silent by indignation. Releasing Shen Zichuan's wrist, Xiaoqia slid his hand along his waist, his ticklish touch turning Shen Zichuan's face red. At first, he held strong, but when Xiaoqia pressed his chest against him, firm and hot, his expressive eyes gradually misted over again. Between gasps for breath, he tipped his head back and laughed. Xiaoqia loved Lanzhou's laugh to the moon and back. When those half-closed eyes rippled with emotion, his reflection drowned in them. Shen Zichuan laughed until his neck ran with sweat and his clothes were stuck to his back. He was exhausted when he calmed his breathing enough to welcome Xiaoqia's kiss. The warmth under the cloak made Shen Zichuan forget all about the snowstorm. Xiaoqia knew Lanzhou often didn't sleep well, but tonight, he was here. He would make sure that, from now on, Lanzhou only ever dreamed of him. Yeah, when else has Shen Zichuan laughed? Obviously, this is not the literal first time, especially since Xiaoqia is like, he loves his laugh. But I don't remember when he has laughed. Like, when did that happen? Did I say that was the end of the chapter? We have one more chapter today. See, that would have been a good ending point potentially, but we have one more today, and it's called Qingshu Tribe. So I don't know what that means for this chapter, but we're on page 273 for chapter 210, Qingshu Tribe. The snowstorm was still raging at dawn the next day. The charcoal braziers in the military tents had gone cold. All the generals gathered in the main tent by candlelight, standing around a map on a table and waiting for Xiao Qie to speak. The battle at the Chasha sinkhole hadn't been a particularly tough fight, but the circumstances had been perilous. Xiao Qie had taken advantage of the snowstorm and led Qi north to the sinkhole, where fewer Biansha troops were stationed. Qi's reinforcements had only come so quickly because they still had a relay station nearby. But since he had shifted the bulk of his forces to the southeast and taken a beating at the hands of Xiao Qie's Libe armored cavalry, he'd given Tantai Hu, who was watching for any movement in Duanzhou like a hawk, the opportunity to swoop in with his timely support. Xiao Qie had merely removed his armor last night before lying down. Once the medic withdrew from the tent, Xiao Qie rotated his shoulders and looked around at the others. We're not here to win one battle, but to wrest Duanzhou from them. Qi is dead, and the majority of his troops are still stationed in the southeast. There are less than 10,000 left within the city walls. It's an opportunity we can't afford to miss. Fei Sheng stole a few glances at his master as he brought his daily medicine. He noted the governor to be in decent spirits. A fair few of their soldiers escaped yesterday. Yin Chong leaned over the map and put a finger on the southeast of Duanzhou. Once the troops camped here receive the news, they'll guess we'll attack the city next time. They will move to intercept us. The old man's unkempt beard was haphazardly tied. While he feared no one when it came to discussing strategy, he didn't dare drink in the presence of Shen Sichuan and Xiao Qie, relying on cups of strong tea to satisfy his cravings. Xiao Qie didn't immediately reply. Instead, he left the floor open for Tantai Hu to speak. In the past 2 years, Tantai Hu had come to acquire some insights of his own. He pondered the second master's silence, then raised a finger to tap the city of Duanzhou. We're at the Chasha sinkhole, some distance away from the city walls. If the Biansha troops in the southeast ride north to intercept us, the military strength in Duanzhou proper will remain unchanged. He shot an apprehensive glance at Xiao Qie. When he saw that Xiao Qie's expression remained unchanged, he went on. Once that happens, Wu Ziyu, currently stationed on Mount Luo, can go around to the west side of Duanzhou. We can launch a surprise attack from that direction. Xiao Qie nodded approvingly. Sure, we can make ourselves bait and lure their main forces to the Chasha sinkhole. Gu Jin cut in, his expression somber. But master, the Chasha River will be right at our backs. The moment Amor seizes the opportunity to launch a sneak attack across the river, or Hasen gets sent south, we'll be under attack from 2 sides. If Wu Ziyu's men are on the west side of Duanzhou, then, we'll be left without reinforcements. Without reinforcements, the hearts of our soldiers fighting on the northern front would break if they heard you. Even as he spoke, Xiao Qie kept one watchful eye on Shen Zichuan drinking his medicine. Is Third Sand Camp not reinforcement? Gu Jin paused, then shook his head. I don't trust Guo Wei Li. Oh, and just looking up at what y'all are saying, Henry, you said, I really do hope we don't have drama or mistrust between Lanzhou and so on. I hope this is one of the rare Danmei that doesn't rely on that as a source of conflict past the early volumes. I agree. I do think if it happens, I trust Tang Jiuqing to do it properly. But I agree that, like, I'm hoping the story doesn't go in that direction. It feels like it won't at this point, but I don't know. We still have the rest of Volume 6 and then 7 and 8, so I don't know, but I feel like there are so many other sources of conflict that we don't need to do that in this story. But also, I agree with Gujin. I don't trust Guo Weili. I still wonder what's going to be happening with that whole situation. Xiao Jie did not dwell on this topic. He patted Gujin lightly on the back. Dage has a clear view of the situation from where he sits in the homeland. We must take Duanzhou at all costs. Lu Guangbai and Shifu are still fighting on the northern front. All three camps will do their utmost to stall Hasen. As for Amor, Xiao Jie's smile was sharp. The only tribe he can deploy quickly enough is the Qingshu tribe. Qi Juyan's request to go on the offensive against the Qingshu tribe had been denied by both the Empress Dowager and the Ministry of War, but that didn't mean she was totally helpless. Qidong's military provisions are being supplied by the Yan clan. The carriages set out for Cejun Commandery 3 days ago. Shen Zichuan spoke through the lingering bitterness of the medicine. Grand Marshal Qi should have eaten her fill by now. As long as Qi Juyan could fill her stomach, she could keep playing the long game with Chudu. She hadn't ventured into the capital to contend with those wily old foxes for several years now. It was more trouble than it was worth. But now that the scimitars were flashing right before her eyes, her priorities had changed. The Biansha horsemen can't move as swiftly in the snow. Excuse me. I keep feeling like I have to yawn. I finally just yawned. It was really weird. It was like almost happening and then not happening. I kept pausing because I was like, I'm going to yawn, and then it wouldn't. Oh god, finally. That was, I promise I'm not bored. I just have to yawn sometimes. The Biansha horsemen can't move as swiftly in the snow. We still have some time to prepare, Xiao Jie said. I didn't skip anything, did I? I don't think I did. I think I'm good. Our encampment now is rudimentary. Have the Duanzhou garrison troops dig trenches around the perimeter tonight. Take shifts for night patrol. And don't forget to send falcons out for reconnaissance. The Imperial Army and Libe armored cavalry have been fighting hard for several days, so make sure to rest whenever possible. We have to conserve our strength if we're to stall the enemy long enough to give Wu Ziyu a chance to get to Duanzhou. Oh, Henry, you said I remember Brittany saying yawning can be a stress response. Me just like, what's gonna happen now? I guess that would make sense. Or a way to improve alertness. I don't know how bodies work. I guess that could be it. We have to conserve our strength if we're to stall the enemy long enough to give Wu Ziyu a chance to get to Duanzhou. With the heavy snow obstructing the roads, any message delivered via horseback would reach Mount Law too late. Fortunately, the Libe armored cavalry had brought along their falcons, which could deliver a message to Mount Law in the northwest within hours. Everyone voiced their agreement. Once they started to discuss logistics among themselves, Xiao Jie reached into his lapels. Shen Zichuan had just set down the medicine bowl and grasped the folding fan in his sleeve when something dropped into the cradle of his arms. He stared. It was a piece of candy wrapped in oil paper. Xiao Jie continued looking at the map with a perfectly straight face, as if he'd had nothing to do with it at all. That's so cute. He's like, you just took your medicine. I know it's bitter. Here is candy. Oh, it's, Vase, you said it stretches your vagus nerve. Okay, yeah, the vagus nerve seems to be important. I've been hearing a lot about that lately. Um, yeah, Henry, I agree. I don't understand people who get mad at others for yawning. Because, like, I can't think of, like, I'm sure there are people out there who yawn on purpose to be, like, passive aggressive. But most of the time, it's not that. So, um, yeah. On Mount Law, Wu Ziyu was awakened by his deputy general at midnight. He opened the letter the falcon had brought and read it by candlelight in his tent. Instantly, he was wide awake. Not daring to rest a moment longer, he rose to put on his armor. Where is Yan Heru? The question was hardly out of his mouth when Yan Heru popped his head out from behind the tent flap. Here I am. Wu Ziyu clutched the letter and said gruffly, Are the men dead? We're just letting him enter as he wishes. Hey, come on now, don't be mad. Yan Heru ducked under the flap, cradling his little golden abacus against his chest. The governor told me to wait here, so I'm waiting, yes? What else am I supposed to do? Master Wu, aren't you being way too cautious? This is an army, not a merchant caravan. If anything goes wrong, we might just lose our heads. Wu Ziyu had dealt with the Mount Law bandits when he'd prepared military provisions for the Libe armored cavalry the year before. He wasn't flustered speaking with someone like Yan Heru. He folded the letter. We're moving out soon. The Mount Law bandits have just been eradicated, and my lords aren't comfortable leaving you here alone. Now hurry and pack. You'll march with me. They all knew Yan Heru had no qualms doing business with the Bian Cha people in the past. If they were to leave him on Mount Law, there would be no one to keep an eye on him. Wu Ziyu didn't like that. This man had to be carefully watched. Yan Heru's face went a shade paler with fright. Still hugging his abacus, he trailed behind Wu Ziyu. Swords and sabers have no eyes, Master Wu. They don't look out for innocents. Why take me? My family's businesses depend on me. I can't go dying on the battlefield. You know how much Qidong needs military provisions, right? Well, I'm the one in charge of their delivery now, so I'll just stay behind. Or, you can even assign someone to escort me back to Suzhou. Dunzhou is fine too. You seem to think these soldiers here aren't capable of protecting you. Wu Ziyu grinned menacingly, baring his teeth. I'll take you back right after the battle. You can return with our governor. I assure you, this won't hold up your affairs. Without waiting for Yan Heru's reply, he called for a guard to stuff the young man into the carriage to be shipped out with the troops. Wu Ziyu exhaled deeply at the entrance of the tent. It was still dark. He took out the letter he'd folded up earlier and read through it again. The candlelight from the tent silhouetted his figure in the doorway. For a long time, he stared blankly at the phrase, surprise attack. If the attack they were proposing on Duanzhou failed, Xiaoqia's safety would be at risk. This battle had to be fought, not only quickly, but with a steady hand. The two men inextricably linked to the outcome of this war were both at the Chasha sinkhole at the moment. Wu Ziyu couldn't afford to take responsibility for the loss of either of them. He felt a massive weight come down on his shoulders, and he had to shoulder it. But I'm just the supply squadron. A deep crease formed between Wu Ziyu's brows as he frowned. He gazed out into the night and recalled the first time he'd met Xiaoqia. Under the blazing sun, Xiaoqia had turned his head back to look at him, his eyes deep and quiet. Aren't you the Libe armored cavalry? To this day, Wu Ziyu still hadn't dared answer that question. He appeared to have quietly accepted his lot as an escort for the supply wagons, but at the same time he was loath to submit to this fate. When he was younger, Xiao Jiming had sent him to border camp as punishment for drinking on the job. He had watched Zhao Hui become the commanding general of the 3 great battalions of Liu Yang, and now he was watching again as Chen Yang and Gu Jin were each successively entrusted with heavier and heavier responsibilities. Meanwhile, Xiao Qia held him back in border camp, never once deploying him on the front lines. Wu Ziyu spat into the dirt and stuffed the letter back into his lapels. He took a few steps forward in the snow before suddenly leaping up and pumping his clenched fists in the air. If Xiaoqia was willing to give him this chance, he would stake his life and all he held dear to fight this battle for him. By early evening the next day, the snowfall had begun to lighten. Xiaoqia stood in the tent and strapped on his heavy armor. Several of the plates had taken damage from the assaults of the iron hammers a few days before. Those on his arms were the most severely battered. The left side, which had taken the brunt of Aqi's blows, was visibly dented. Wu Ziyu has arrived on the western side of Duanzhou. Get through tonight, and we can execute a surprise attack from both sides tomorrow morning. Xiaoqia appeared even taller in armor, blocking practically all the light from the candle. Shen Zichuan sat on the plank bed watching him. In the eyes of others, his presence here had a deeper meaning. Xiao Jiming's willingness to put everything on the line and let all three of Li Bei's camps assist Zhang Bo in this battle was not only because Xiaoqia was here. It was also because Shen Zichuan was here. His presence itself was a show of his sincerity. Fei Sheng and the embroidered uniform guard will follow He Rigu. They can take the place of the scouts we're lacking. Shen Zichuan looked on as Xiaoqia fastened the arm guard. If you don't come back tomorrow, I'll send the remaining troops to the front line in Duanzhou. The troops Xiaoqia was leaving behind here were meant to serve as a protective barrier for Shen Zichuan. If something unexpected were to happen, these men had been instructed to escort him north, where soldiers stationed at 3rd Sand Camp would ride out to receive him. Xiaoqia's hand stilled. He looked up from his arm guard as understanding dawned. Shen Zichuan motioned for Xiaoqia to crouch down. He could hardly squat in his armor, so he stepped back and went down on one knee before Lanzhou. Snow drifted like willow catkins through the sky. Over the breeze came the sound of Fei Sheng lecturing Yin Chang about his drinking. Outside, the Li Bei armored cavalry trudged through the snow in their heavy armor, moving like a well-oiled machine. It was noisy all around, but inside the tent, the coal burned quietly in the brazier, and the pot of tea hanging above it pinged lightly as it came to a boil. Xiaoqia's gaze was penetrating. Of late, his sharp edges were becoming harder and harder to conceal. Wait for me here. I'd love to go, of course. Shen Zichuan's cloak slipped off his shoulders. Mimicking Xiaoqia's favorite gesture, he took Xiaoqia's chin between his fingers and cocked his head. But I'm no soldier. I've married a poor man in a long winter. All your wife can do is stay behind and wait for better times. Xiaoqia, who had been letting Shen Zichuan manhandle him as he wished, burst out laughing at these words. Shen Zichuan could hear the shuffle of Gu Jin's boots outside the tent. He took the helmet and secured it on Xiaoqia's head. Meeting Xiaoqia's eyes, he exchanged a kiss with him through the cold steel. Xiaoqia's icy iron fingers caressed Shen Zichuan's cheeks. After tonight, he said, his voice low and deep, my Lanzhou will rule over Zhangbo. He had tested his new sabers on Aqi, but it was far from enough. His appetite was large enough to devour both the northern and southern battlefields. Every battle was a trial. He wanted to hone his blade even faster. The Biansha main force in the southeast numbered 25,000, of which only 5,000 were scorpions. The remaining troops lacked horses, so many of them were temporarily acting as infantrymen. They'd lost their commanding general, Aqi, and they were unable to request new orders from their leaders across the Chasha River. Obstructing Xiaoqia was their last option to defend Duanzhou. This was what Xiaoqia wanted. He needed them to have no choice but to face him. Once these 25,000 men moved to meet him, the western side of Duanzhou would be wide open, and Wu Ziyu could begin his attack on the city. The advantage in Shen Zichuan sealing off Zhongbo was now apparent. Duanzhou would get no assistance from any direction. And since all their provisions had gone to feed Aqi's 20,000 men on the move, the 8,000 troops guarding the city would meet the enemy's attack on empty stomachs. Right. Henry, you said, now I'm worried. Blue, you said, babe, that's great and all, but please slow down. I agree. It's a little bit... I'm a little concerned when, I guess it's like when Xiaoqia is having a lot of ambitions. And it's like, but are you going to be able to do all that? Is this going to work out? I don't know. While the battle in Zhongbo was just beginning, the Bianjun commentary was deep in its nightly rhythms. News of Aqi's defeat had yet to reach the Qingshu tribe, whose night patrol squad was presently roaming just outside the border of the Bianjun commentary. The commanding general of the Qingshu tribe was a man called Su Mong, who'd been Ha Sen's deputy general when Ha Sen was in the south. He had crossed swords with Lu Guangbai here, and been permitted to partake in official strategy meetings in Amor's own tent. But because his tribe was weak, he hadn't been permitted to follow Ha Sen up north. For once, it wasn't snowing in Bianjun commentary tonight. From afar, Suotian Pass looked like a sleeping beauty reclining on her couch, with her head pillowed upon the city. Tufts of snow floated through the air, and no trace of the moon could be found behind the clouds. In fact, it was a little too quiet. Su Mong felt ill at ease. He increased the number of soldiers on night patrol, instructing his men to keep all eyes on the border of Bianjun commentary in case of a surprise attack from the garrison troops. During the latter half of the night, the patrol squad lit a campfire in the wilderness. They filled their stomachs with melted snow, and roasted the dried meat jerky they carried with them. The scorpions in the north have been winning battles, one man said in the Biansha tongue, breaking off pieces of jerky. Soon enough, they'll be able to join the 12 tribes. When that happens, will we still receive provisions down here in the south? Sipping on melted snow, Su Mong shook his head. The Esuhuri will never allow the scorpions to become a true tribe. They are servants of the Liaoying tribe. The scorpions' mothers were all natives of the Zhou Empire, and now, thanks to the emergence of traitors like He Rigu, it would be difficult to convince the Biansha masses to accept the scorpions as their own, even if they were victorious in battle. Moreover, in the desert, all tribes already answered to Ha Sen. If they give us Gidal, the man said, smiling at Su Mong, then we'll never have to worry about starving again. Su Mong gulped more melted snow and didn't answer immediately. He'd attempted to sound Amor out on this topic before he'd gotten nowhere. The Qingshu tribe was not a powerful one. The Liaoying tribe of today was no longer the minor power it had been in the past, and the Huiyan tribe had thrown in their lot with Li Bei, leaving the Qingshu tribe here to choke on sand with the troops of the Bianjun garrison. Who would have expected that even their adversary would take off in the end? Su Mong had been stationed here day in and day out for years now, but he could not see a future. He had pinned all his hopes on his young son. But as it happened, his son had passed at the beginning of spring this year, as little ones tended to do. Ow, damn. That's, Blue, you said you'll take it as confirmation that Shen Zichuan does not have any Biansha blood. Back to your conspiracy theory that he's the old emperor's son. Yeah, I'm still wondering about that. Yeah, our conspiracy. Henry, yours too. Mine too, kind of. I had it for a while, and now it's kind of on the back burner, but now I'm kind of wondering about it again. Um, so, yeah. And we aren't waiting here for nothing. These were the only words of comfort Sumong could offer. At least we won't face Li Bei's wrath if we stay here. The men all burst into laughter. The campfire crackled. Several feral dogs slunk up behind one of the soldiers, who brandished a withered branch and hissed to drive them away. But the dogs were starving. They drooled and huffed as they circled the men. Drive them off, Sumong ordered. The man stood up, grabbed his scimitar, and stomped his feet. The dogs cowered back, and the soldier, his belly bulging, turned back to Sumong. We can hunt them. Doghide is. Before he could finish, the dogs lunged for him as if mad. Teeth baring and snarling, they dragged him to the ground and latched onto his arm so fiercely he dropped the scimitar. The leather of his armor couldn't keep out their sharp fangs, and he howled with pain. Sumong shot to his feet. The horsemen on night patrol ran to the screaming soldier and kicked the feral dogs away, then dragged the man back toward the fire. The eyes of these dogs gleamed strangely red. Sumong wasn't taking any chances. He ordered his men to draw their bows and shoot. Something's wrong with these dogs. Are they rabid? The faint cries of a partridge reverberated through the night. Seeming to sense danger, the dogs turned tail and fled just as the soldiers got on their horses and nocked their arrows. The animals scrambled westward in a panic, with the horsemen in hot pursuit. One feral dog took an arrow to the leg, but, even limping, continued to flee. The soldier behind it drew his scimitar and leaned down, intent on ending the creature with a slash. They galloped wildly, snow frothing under their hooves. An explosive shriek rang out, and a long arrow came hurtling in from the west. The pursuing soldier instantly toppled from his mount. Foot still caught in the stirrup, the man was dragged all the way across the border by the galloping horse. Shit. Sumong felt a pressing sense of dread. Amor had been firm in his instructions not to engage Qidong right now. As long as they stayed put in their territory, Qi Juyin couldn't step out to engage them. He tugged on the reins and shouted, "Fall back." But ahead of them, torches were flaring to life one after another, until their surroundings were lit as bright as day. Qi Juyin. Sumong cursed her in the Zhou tongue. Devious woman. As one, the Qidong garrison troops raised their shields. The cold steel of their blades glinted in the firelight. Qi Juyin stood in front of her combat-ready troops in full battle array. Crushing a clump of snow beneath her boot, she drawled, "Light the beacon tower. Tell Chudu, the Qingshu tribe has breached our border and invaded our territory." So she chased them into their border with the dogs, which I don't think the dogs are actually rabid, but they must have done something to rile the dogs up. I don't really know what they could have done, but like something was up with those dogs. Regardless, they got them to chase them into their territory, so that's incredible. If what Henry, I'm so glad this is fiction and not real life. If what did Xiaoqi in after all this was rabies, I'd be beside myself. No, Blue, not the wolf pup falling from grace because of rabies. Oh my god. No, Henry, it's just Gumong. Yep, it was just Gumong all along. So that's the end of the chapter, and that's where we're stopping for today. We have 3 more streams of this book now. We are fully more than halfway through. Very exciting. And I I like how, so last time I remember we were talking about like the thing that happened where, what was it, like the rumor that Shenzi Chuan had like lost a limb or something, and like this rumor spread, and then Xiaoqia freaked out and it turned out like not to be anything. And we're talking about that, and it's like, well, we don't want her to like repeat that twice because that would be kind of cheap. But she absolutely didn't do that. But like, we kind of had this scenario where we thought that Xiaoqia was like in trouble, and I kind of assumed that he had been like injured or something. And then even though all this stuff happened, he ended up like winning once again. So it's not at all the same. But like, we didn't get the thing that we kind of were like nervous about, which was like Xiaoqia being like injured or stuck, or, you know, something really bad happened. It was like he still, at the end of all this, was on top of things. And then when he did fall in the pit, like, Shenzi Chuan was there, and then, they, like, presumably their people got them out of the pit, and everything was fine. And it's just like, I feel, it almost makes me more concerned when new things come up, because I'm like, at some point, they're gonna mess up. At some point, something really bad is gonna happen. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, well, this time was fine. Like, he was in trouble, but, like, he ended up in the sinkhole only through the events of, like, basically, like, successfully leading, the Bian Sha people to the sinkhole. And honestly, it was not clear how many of them fell in the sinkhole. Like, I don't know if this was, like, the same kind of thing of, like, mass amounts of people falling into the sinkhole. It doesn't really sound like it to me, but it was not really clear, like, how that went down. But, yeah, it's... Regardless, it's just every success, it makes me more nervous for, like, what's gonna happen now? But... Yeah, and as for Shenzi Chuan's background, I still feel like I've got theories, and then I think about it, and I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. I'm just like, I don't know. I can't wait to find out, but I think we're gonna be along for the ride a little bit longer before we find out more about that. If he's secretly the old emperor's son or something, or whatever the heck it could be. I don't know. But yeah. Oh, Blue, you said it sounds like it was just a few. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. That checks out. I think if it was like a lot, that would be clear in the text, because that would be a pretty significant moment. And if he is, what about the girl? The one who's supposed to be the new emperor, right? And it's unfortunate with her, because I'm like, I like her. I don't like the powers that be, the power, I guess it's just one power mainly. It's Shui Shoujuo, who's trying to use her for his own means. So it's kind of like this thing of like, well, I don't want her to be emperor, not because like, I don't want that girl to be an emperor, but like, because of who gets power if that happens, but also maybe it happens and maybe things get turned on their head and she does her own thing and not what he wants. That would be cool too. I sure hope that she doesn't get executed. Yeah, I agree, Henry. Yeah, there's still so many question marks at this point. Also, I really hope we get like a real like a Xiaoqia Shenzi Chuan like wedding. Because at this point, they're already married, basically. They're already talking like they're married. But, like, I need us to have a wedding at the end of everything. I just need that. Anyway, I'm gonna go. I will see y'all on Wednesday. And on Wednesday, we will be on chapter 211, which is called Hard Frost. So, see y'all then. Bye.